A student with a disability is someone who cannot function to their greatest potential.
A student with a disability is someone who has trouble, whether it be mentally or physically, and it inhibits the way they can either learn or go out doing everyday things that people who don't have a disability do.
A disability is any mental or physical handicap that puts a person at a natural disadvantage.
Something to hinder or prevent you from doing what any other average person can do.
Right.
A disability is something that I guess inhibits someone from doing just normal everyday actions, or even just like anything with like athletics or school or learning, anything like that.
Okay, so I think a disability is like an obstacle that prevents people from like doing something they want to do or accomplish something. So I think it could be physical or mental, but yeah, that's a disability.
A disability is anything that hinders an individual from being able to accomplish everyday tasks, as far as whether it's mental or physical.
Disability could affect a student's education, I think, two ways. One of them being the actual effect of the disability, not being able to process the information in the correct way, but also that it can definitely make students feel isolated in some ways, and they're not getting the full experience that if they're put in a different sort of means of education or a different sort of way of learning the material, then they feel different from everyone else and they feel isolated. And I'm sure there's some sort of bullying that goes along with that. So that can definitely affect the student's education on the surface, and then also, if you're reading between the lines, it definitely makes an impact as well.
Slower rates of learning, more time, and discrete types of teaching, other types of behavioral supports, modifications for what you're teaching, modifications for how they demonstrate their learning.
I think they do. I just know from my high school and stuff like that, they've had really good programs, especially at Clemson. There's really good programs. So I think the school systems do a really good job, and they're also improving too. So I think as we continue, it'll get even better.
Absolutely not.
That for me is a difficult question to answer because I don't have a learning disability, but I would say probably not, because just based on my understanding of disabilities, it seems like they're so far and in between, so many different kinds, and also they can vary in severeness between all of them. So I feel that especially in public schools, they don't have the type of hands-on help they need to deal with these. I can't speak to private schools, but I feel in my school it was basically just one general program for everyone with a disability, while all disabilities aren't really the same. So I feel like that almost doesn't really apply. So
I don't know personal examples, but I don't think that every school is giving every person with disability the full opportunities that they deserve.
I guess that would mean not characterizing them by their disability, but rather who they are as a person. And I think that's the best way to identify people.
I think person-first language is really important when you talk about a student with a disability, because they are people too. They are students, just like all of us. So we shouldn't treat them any differently. So I think person-first means not treating anyone differently than even if they have a disability or not.
It's when describing someone or talking about someone using their first name to make sure that you know that they're a person and they're not defined by their disability or their character traits.
It's acknowledging that that person is a person before they are someone who has a disability.
An intellectual disability might affect everything in your life, but a learning disability will just affect learning in school and stuff like that.
So a learning disability could inhibit how you can learn. So you may not be able to focus in classroom, or may not be able to do what every other student does and just sit and learn. Well, intellectual disability may be like you don't understand what you're trying to learn. Like you're having difficulty understanding the material the way it's presented to you.
I think doing this project was really interesting to see how people responded to the general questions we asked about special education, and yet the responses were most interesting.
I think the most interesting part about this whole project was the fact that a lot of people danced around certain topics. It was really hard for them to answer certain questions because they didn't want to use some words over others. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
And with that, I interviewed a couple of people who point blank asked me not to use their videos because they really didn't like the words that they chose, even though the words they chose might be proper terminology in special ed.
Yeah, I know I had a really hard time with our last few questions about person-first language. I don't know if you had a hard time with that.
Yeah, a lot of people thought it should have been first-person language, not so much person-first. And also with the intellectual versus learning disability, many people didn't recognize the difference.